there, everybody. My name is Chad Carrier. We're streaming here live from Berlin for an exclusive preview of the new D2 controller from Traktor division. And I'm going to be focusing today on a feature that I think everyone's really excited to hear about. And this is the new Stems feature that we will be bringing out this summer. And it just so happens that this D2 controller here is an exceptional way to work with stems. But first, what are stems? Stems are a new file format that we're introducing that allows you to not only play a track as you normally would, but actually control the mix of the individual elements in the song. Specifically, this stem file contains 5 tracks. You get the stereo master, which you can play on any system. You can play it on iTunes, you can play it on a CDJ, whatever you'd like. But when you load it into a device that is capable of playing back stems, you actually get access to 4 additional files. Now these files are created by the artist, and these can be things like the drums, the bass, synthesizers, vocals, guitars, anything they like to break down their song. It can be different for every song. Sometimes a very sparse arrangement just might be kick and bass on one channel, some hi-hats on another. But other times you'll get a full band, so drums, bass, guitars, and vocals all split across. On the D2 here, we have a nice display, and as you can see, I have a track playing right now. This looks like a normal track in that we see one waveform going by, but this does happen to be a stem file. We do have a little hint of that right now by seeing 4 names across the bottom of the screen that align with the 4 channels here on the controller. Right now I see one that says drums, bass, chords, pads, and acid. Now I can shift and zoom into this track and actually obtain a DAW view. So as we scan around, we can see that this actually looks like a DAW. I've got a drum track, a bass track, chords, and pads and acid. Now, anytime I load a new track, these names will change. So here, I'll load another track right now, and I have a new arrangement. I have drums, bass, instrument, and vocals. And this track here that I've loaded happens to be a rather popular rock song. So I'm going to go ahead and start it so you all can get an idea of how this works. So right now we can see we have drums at the top, a bass line here, the guitars, and the vocals. Now with these 4 faders across the top here, I can adjust the volumes of these individual tracks. For example, I can turn down the drums. I can also turn down the bass. And I can even pull out the guitars and just leave us with the vocals. Or isolate just the drums, bring the bass in, instruments, and vocals. So you have the full song available right there at your fingertips. So easy to just drop out drums, throw them back in, instant acapellas, or instant vocals, or instant instrumental. Now the D2 is also a controller for our remix decks. And our remix decks have some additional functions on every channel which also were inherited by our new stem deck. So not only do I have volume controls per channel, but I also have filters per channel and effect send per channel. Using these buttons down here at the bottom of the screen, I can change the mode. And right now, for example, I can pull up the filter mode. Now I'm going to go ahead and play this, and I'm going to start adjusting the filter on the drum track. And you can hear me low passing it and high passing it without affecting anything else that's playing back. So there's low passed drums. We only really hear the kick drum now, or I can go the other way. And we hear the tops of the drums, but not the bass. This feature works on any track, so I can do the same thing to the vocals, or the same thing to the bass line. Very strange. But it can be very useful in the middle of the mix. There's an additional mode here when I switch with these arrows. Now I have effect send per channel. And I can use this to send effects from any of these stems into the Traktor effects units. Now at the top here, as you can see, just by touching one of the knobs, I get a display showing me what effects are available. Right now I have a beat masher, a delay, and a reverb loaded up and assigned to these controls up here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first play this track, and I'm going to enable all the effect sends. And I'm going to use the beat masher. What you're going to hear sounds very much like when we actually apply a beat masher to a normal track. It's going to cut up the whole thing and kind of rearrange it and create a drum fill. Check it out. It's tempo synced, but it is cutting up the whole track. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the effect sends on everything except the drums. Now when I do this and I apply the beat masher, it's only going to affect the drum part. So, obviously this can be a lot of fun, where you can actually create drum fills on top of a track that didn't have any, use it for build-ups without destroying everything else. You can also do some other things like feeding the vocals through a bunch of reverb. So if I isolate the vocal track and hit play, able to add all that cavernous reverb on top of just the vocal without all the drums and bass muddying up the reverb. So those are the basic ways we work with a stem. It's a very simple machine, just volume control, filter, and effect send. But the way it's presented here on the D2 provides us the opportunity to do something else. These pads down here are normally used for hot cues, loops, or the freeze mode for being able to pound out new rhythms. But there's also a button here that says remix. Now what this does is it allows us to control a remix deck that's also assigned to this unit. Right now I'm looking at deck A, but if I happen to press the deck button, this switches to deck C, which happens to be a remix deck right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to load up a stem on deck A, and then I'm going to load a remix set on deck C. We can see a whole bunch of samples have just appeared. I can scroll through them on the screen, and the pads down here will allow me to trigger these various samples. But when we have the focus on deck A, as I've done just now, I can press the remix button and access the samples from the remix deck while still controlling deck A. So when I play this song here, I can now start taking out parts from the stem and adding new parts with the remix deck. So I'm going to take out the original drum track and put in some new samples from the remix deck. Back at the right tempo. So here I can actually put a drum and bass tempo drum loop under this song. And I can switch back to the original. And I can continue to remix like this. And I can even start replacing the bass line with maybe a bass loop. So now this mix went from a nice kind of mellow, spacey kind of drum step track to a more aggressive drum and bass track. And I was able to do that all within the confines of this one mixer right here. Very cool interface for this kind of stuff. And then right back to the original again. So that's the basic way that the D2 can control stems and remix decks. Now, I'm sure that was a lot of information, so we welcome you to speak to the ambassadors at the store and ask some questions. They have the ability to write questions to us, and I will be able to answer any questions you have, including maybe being able to demo some features that you would like some additional details on. While you guys are asking those questions and they are being typed over, I'll just kind of mess around here a little bit, and Charlie will let me know when the first question is available. All right. So it looks like the first question up here is, this was no surprise. When will stems be available? Well, the answer to that is this summer. The version of Traktor that will be coming out will be version 2.9.0, and you'll be looking for that sometime around the July time frame. At that time, we hope to have lots of stem material available, but you'll see more and more stem material coming out as time progresses after this initial release. And here's another relevant question. What file format is stems? Well, like I mentioned earlier, it is a single file that you get, and this happens to be an MP4 file. Now, an MP4 is actually a container, and that means you can stuff bunches of things inside of it, and that's exactly what we've done. We've taken the MP4 and stuck 5 files inside, and we can encode them in different ways. We can give them a nice, compact AAC encoding, like the audio quality that you would get if you bought a song from iTunes. But do remember that it's iTunes quality for each of the stems, so when you add the 4 stems together, it's actually better than iTunes quality. But if you really want it, you can also encode stems in Apple lossless format. So then you will have no loss of quality at all, even though the file size will be a little bit bigger, because do remember that this is basically the equivalent of 5 songs in length stuffed inside of one track. Okay, another question here. What future support from artists will be from stems? And I'm guessing that means just like what kind of artists will be supporting stems. And the nice thing is we've spoken to many already and given them a similar kind of taste of what you're seeing right now, and they have freaked out. They have been so excited about this format, not only as a way of providing the music to you to be able to play, but also for themselves when they go out and play these things in a live context. Because not only is it artists that can do this, but producer DJs. If you play with any sort of production tools at home and write your own music, you can also create these stem files and be able to play them out at your own gigs, interacting with them individually, doing much more than you'd be able to do with a normal track. Okay, so here's another question. How many stem files can you control at the same time on a single D2 unit? Well, the D2 is designed to control 2 decks simultaneously, one on the top and one on the bottom. And normally I would have another D2 here on this side, so I would have control of all 4 decks in Traktor. But with just one D2 unit, I get to control either deck A or deck C. And both decks can be configured as stems. So one D2 could essentially control 2 stem files, aka 8 individual stems at the same time, though you do need to toggle back and forth between the 2 views. So you can interact with 4 on deck A and then switch to deck C and interact with another 4. And you can do the same thing over on the other side too, interacting with 4 on deck B and interacting with another 4 on deck D. Okay, will we be able to find older tracks being released on stems format? Well, I surely hope so, because I know there's a lot of classics that I would love to be able to play in stem format. And you can bet that there will be a number of labels that will try to release old classics, maybe remastered and ready for stem format. But it will be a little more difficult for them because they do have to go back to their vaults to find all the original tracks that they had to be able to reproduce this format. So while I'm sure they will come, it's up to the labels to determine what they will actually release. But you can bet that the newest hits will definitely be coming out in this format because they can make the stems and the normal masters at the same exact time. Ooh, yes. Okay, how will the stem format work as an open source system? All right, well, this is an open file format. We are not making this file format to be something that is proprietary just for native instruments. We know that in order for this format to be successful, in order for artists and labels to want to distribute their music in this format, it needs to be able to be used by as many DJs as possible. Now, I personally love using Traktor, obviously, when I DJ, but I know some people don't. That's fine. but they should still be able to take advantage of the power of stems. So we will have a website available where any manufacturer, software or hardware, can go learn about the stem format, learn exactly how to implement it in their own products. So the one stem file that you will get will then be able to be used in multiple places, and no additional license fees paid to us or anyone for this format. Okay, next, do you need to have the D2 or S8 in order to control the stems? The answer is no. Right now, the D2 and the S8 are going to be the best ways to do it because we offer the best visualization on the screen and associated channels that are optimized for use in this stem control format. But the truth is, it's just volume controls, filter controls, and send effect controls that make stems unique, and all of those controls are available in the controller manager so that you can map those to any MIDI controller that you have. You can map it to any controller that we make. You can find a little maybe fader box somewhere and map the controls to that, and it will totally work. So this is definitely open both in terms of the file format and for hardware support, but natively speaking, the D2 and the S8 will be the best ones at the start. Okay, how does it affect the final track mastering? All right, I'm glad someone asked. As I'm sure you know, trying to recreate the sound of a fully mastered track when you can actually change the mix of the stems is very difficult. We know this. We know that it's not acceptable to just master the individual stems and mix them together and expect them to sound the same. What we are doing is we're actually going to recreate the final stages of compression and limiting in real time during playback. So when the artist or label puts together the stem file, they can actually specify exactly how the compressor should work. And when the music plays back, it runs through the compressor in real time and responds to your mix. So when you take out the bass, the compression lightens up, and when you slam the bass back in, the compression will start pounding again, just like it would sound if it was made that way. So while it won't be exactly the same as the original, it will be very close. And within the mix, going back and forth, it should sound great on the dance floor. In fact, I even suspect that it might sound better, because you won't be dealing with a track that's been so hard mashed to sound great on a hi-fi system, but you'll actually have something that has a little more dynamic range to actually kick those subs really hard. This could end up sounding really good. Okay, so yeah, please ask a few more questions if you've got them. I've got a few more here. How expensive will a stems track be compared to a standard track? Okay. That's actually not up to us. As you know, when you go to different download stores, you find music available for different prices. And because this is just an open format, we're just giving it to the community, and it will be up to artists, labels, distributors, and them to determine the pricing for the stem file. Now, I'm pretty sure that they are not going to charge $50 for a stem file. It's going to be a lot lower, so it's still something that you can afford, and buy all the latest hits in this format. It will probably cost a little more because you are getting a little more control, but it shouldn't be astronomically large. It should be something that's completely reasonable for the power that you're getting. Let's see, what labels or stores will be making stems available? Well, we know of 3 already. Beatport, TrackSource, and Juno Downloads. These guys have already been briefed on the stems. They're totally excited about it, and we're working with them to ensure that when this comes out in the middle of the summer, they will have music immediately available for you to buy. And we anticipate that after that, you'll find the stem format showing up in more and more locations. It doesn't need to be sold through a massive retailer. You will be able to download the stem creator tool. You could make your own track in stem format, and you can sell it yourself. This is nothing that's controlled in any way by us or by the labels. This is a format as easy to use as MP3 or AAC. And we have a number of labels already on board. I mean, I've been playing some tracks here from some of these labels like 50 Weapons, Tool Room, Noir Music. Who else did I just do? I just did a whole Truncate album. George Vorn. I mean, I've really been impressed with the amount of content and the sources that have been coming in for us to prepare for this stuff. This is definitely not just obscure tracks that you've never heard of. These are going to be very hot releases that you'll be able to access. Let's see, now here's a question. How would it work with external compressors? Okay, so this must be in response to the mastering discussion I was having before. Yes, it's true. If you work with a mastering house that likes to use external gear, outboard compressors and limiters and things like that, that mastering house will have to use our tool to get the results as close as possible. So that's why I was saying earlier that the stem will probably not sound exactly like the original, but it's going to sound extremely close because it's actually the same mastering engineer who will be setting the compressor for use in the stem playback. So he will be able to listen to his original, compare the stem version, adjust our compressor and limiter, which by the way is modeled after a very popular compressor, which I don't think I can actually name. But it's not just some off-the-shelf free compressor or something like that. It's one that Native Instruments has created, and it's very high quality to ensure that these things can sound as close as possible. Now, if the mastering engineer is very creative, he can also still apply some compression to the stems themselves. There's no reason he can't do that to get most of the sound from his outboard gear and then just apply the last stage of brick wall limiting with the stem compressor instead, and that will get it very close. Let's see, if a producer were to make a track, how would that be converted into the stems format? Okay, well this is actually pretty easy. I've done this a number of times myself with my own music. Basically, after you're done with your production, you've got it all done and maybe you've already made the stereo master. The best thing to do is to just go back and solo the sections or the tracks in the production that you want for the various stems. So for example, first is most likely the drums, a stem of just drums, and I would go through and solo all my drum tracks or mute all the other non-drum tracks so that when I hit play on the DAW and I listen, I go, yep, that's the drum track right there, that's all of it. And then I would export that. And then I would immediately do the same thing for the bass parts. Maybe I just have one bass line, maybe there's multiple tracks that comprise the bass, even with some effects. Solo all those, export it. Now I've got the bass stem. Do it 2 more times until you've got all 4 stems done. And then all you do is you just drag and drop those 4 stems into our stem creator tool, which then lines them up all individually, and you can hit play and you can hear them all playing back together and it'll sound just like the original song. And then that's the stage where you can apply the final compression and hit export, and out comes the MP4, all ready to go. All right, another mastering question. When mastering stem files, will you need to bounce down each channel you would like, or will there be a plugin for production software? Okay, I see what this is asking. Yeah, at the start, you will need to do, as I just described, actually go through and it's a manual process of isolating the 4 parts. But since it is only 4 parts, it actually doesn't take that long. This would be much hairier if it was 8 stems or something larger, because then you'd have to go through this process multiple times. But it's actually quick when you do just 4. But that's another reason that we're actually making the stem format an open format and publishing all the information on how to make stems so that other DAW manufacturers can come, grab this information, and actually add direct stem export functionality to their DAWs. So perhaps once you're done with your production, you just highlight a couple tracks and say, those are the drums, that's the bass, that's the synths, and that's the effects, and hit one button and out comes the MP4, all said and done, and there's nothing else for you to do. That would be super awesome. I would love that, and it's actually not too difficult to do from a technical standpoint, so I hope a lot of DAWs do that. Ooh, question from Bristol. How many D2s could you link together? Well, 2 is the answer, and we do provide a USB hub on the back so that you can just use one USB cable from your computer into the first unit and then chain the second one off of it. And even the power jack comes with the little Y cable so that you only need to plug in one power brick and it will power both of the units. And with those two units together, you will then have full control over the 4 decks that are in there. Almost identical to the S8 workflow. Will we be able to loop, flux, and freeze individual stem tracks while the others play? Well, the answer to that is yeah, probably soon. Technically, there's no reason we can't do that. From a workflow perspective, it could be a little tricky. At the first release when this comes out, that sort of functionality will probably not be available. But you can still apply a loop to the whole deck, as you would with a normal track. You can still do flux mode style beat jumps. All of the normal modes still work on the entire deck. But yeah, it is potentially possible that we could go in and do the same thing on the individual stems. We just have to evaluate if that's going to be a reasonable workflow, because it could cause stems to get out of alignment and then you would lose the entire arrangement of the song. And until that time, you can at least use the effects to do the same thing. You can capture a loop with the beat masher, so then you will have essentially looped 1, 2, or 3 of the stems. The other alternative is that you actually load the same stem track into 2 decks, isolate individual parts, and create individual loops on each. When they play together, it sounds like your whole track, but you have separate control over each. Aha, okay, a question from Dexco UK. Can I use the Pioneer CDJs alongside the D2s? Yes, you can. You can actually set up a CDJ here and a CDJ here, and use the CDJ for full transport control. So you can be scratching, pitching, nudging, adjusting the tempo, and then using the D2 here for visualization, for loading the tracks, for controlling the effects, assigning them to the various channels, and also for doing all the looping, remix deck triggering, volume control of the stems. All of that still works together, absolutely. And we have a last question from Bop DJ. Is NI going to maintain the open source code, or is it going to be left to the community? Well, we don't really maintain this code, but we will be monitoring it at our website. And now that means that when requests come in for additional features or changes to the scope, we can do that and treat it as a proper release instead of just letting the format get forked multiple times, as it could happen if it was just purely open source on some place like GitHub, where you could have someone come in, make a new version, someone else come in, make yet another version, and then you have a whole bunch of slightly compatible but maybe incompatible versions, and you'll never be sure if your stem file will play on this product or another. So we do want to make sure that there's consistency in the format and that it doesn't run wild. But we don't have any intention of blocking anything. We definitely want to work with the community to make sure that this format is exactly what DJs need and grows with the DJ needs and market. Okay, last stem question from GAK Brighton. Is there a compressor built into the compiler? And I guess that means the stem creator tool. And the answer is yes. It's built into both the stem creator tool, so you can hear what it sounds like as you adjust all the stems and know that, yes, that's the right amount of compression I want, or it's too much, blah, blah, blah. And those settings are saved in the file, and that same compressor is then available in Traktor. We make that same compressor also available for anyone else to integrate into their products to make sure that the sound that was heard at the time the content was made is exactly what you'll hear when it's played back on any device. So yes, we will have that compressor available for anyone so that there's consistency for the whole format. Well, that's it, everybody. I appreciate your attention. I am very enthused that you're just as excited about us, with us about this stems format, and look forward to talking to you guys again in the future.